Home Affairs has clearly made it its mission to ensure that if a permit is issued or a visa is issued to an applicant for a set purpose, they must adhere to that set purpose.
Yeah.
And if you were, for example, to have worked in South Africa for full time on your study visa and kind of abandon the studies, it's not just you who are at risk. So the risk you face is one, being declared an undesirable person for acting in contravention of your visa. Two, you can face a potential fine from the Department of Home Affairs. And three, criminal prosecution may be applicable.
A quite
But
severe consequence.
not just that, it's also for the institution, because one of the undertakings for that learning institution is that they inform the Director General at the Department of Home Affairs within 30 days of the applicant no longer attending the school. So the time is not just for expatriates to focus on whether they are compliant with their visa, but also to learning institutions and to employers. If, let's say, Home Affairs does perform an audit, they may even find the employer for employing the expatriate on the incorrect visa.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the latest podcast by XPatWEB. My name is Aadil Wadee, Senior Immigration Consultant at XPatWEB. Today I'm joined by my esteemed colleague Manfred Barnard, also Senior Immigration Consultant. XPatWEB is the largest independent service provider for corporates and high net worth individuals. The reason I brought you to here today, Manfred, is to discuss the study visa option. I think it's an option which is going to be a lot in demand of late. We know school years are coming to an end. A lot of schools are going to ask for the renewals of visas which are out there. A lot of individuals who are wanting to apply for study visas, it's the prime time for them to do so. So I thought it best that we discuss this topic once again, just for those who are out there and are facing a lot of stress when it comes to the study visa, because let's be real, studying and then still worrying about your immigration status is not something for the faint-hearted. So I think, Manfred, to start off, what exactly is the study visa? Who is it applicable to? And how do you go about basically determining if it is something which you qualify for?
Right, so thank you so much for the introduction, and I fully agree with you. The school year is around the corner, and we have a lot of expatriates coming to us in a state of panic, some of them, regarding the expiry of their study visas or actually obtaining the requisite study visas. And what a study visa is, in a sense, it is to allow a foreign national to undertake studies in South Africa at a registered learning institution, provided that they can provide the required undertakings and that they are covered by a valid medical scheme, which is often a faux pas from a lot of assignees and often causes rejection.
Yeah.
And with that, I do think an important topic we need to discuss is, where do you actually submit this application?
Yeah.
So what tends to happen is, as an assignee, you get an opportunity, and it's the beginning stages of your career, and you move to South Africa on the required general work visa, for example, and you have a young family, and the children just accompany you on a visitor's visa in type of section 11(1)(b)(4),
Yeah.
which is perfectly sufficient as it allows them to accompany you. When they get a bit older in life, however, and they start going to school, it is required for them to obtain a study visa. Now, a lot of expatriates often think that this means they need to return to their home country in order to get the visa. But in actuality, what it does allow you to do with the child having a valid long-term visa is apply within South Africa to change conditions. And this is a game changer. It means, one, the family won't be separated because you don't have to go all the way to your country of origin. And two, once you've submitted the application in South Africa, it is processed at the Department of Home Affairs without retaining your passport, which is an absolute game changer. But I'm sure a lot of assignees will listen to this and say, but what about this impending backlog of applications? And I can tell you now, when it comes to a study visa, I have noted that Home Affairs does prioritize them in addition to work visas. And one of the key things, though, is that you submit on a first-time accurate basis. And like I said, you need that undertaking letter, you need the medical insurance, you need, for example, to get a medical certificate completed, letters of support from the parents, whatever the case might be. You need to structure that application correctly.
I think to touch on what you mentioned, okay, registered learning institution, quite self-explanatory in terms of South Africa. Medical cover, on the other hand, and this is something we see quite often. Can you touch on the fact that there is a lot of medical cover out there which says, for example, they provide worldwide coverage?
Yeah.
That should mean South Africa is included. But I know for a study visa, South African medical aid is actually what's required, especially if you're submitting from within South Africa. So in terms of those out there who do have medical aid at the moment, what would your recommendation be?
So when it comes to an abroad submission, embassies do accept that a lot of the insurance providers here in South Africa tend to want you to have a long-term visa before insuring you. They just want to make sure you will be spending a significant amount of time in South Africa and they won't be on the receiving end of a bill for an abroad hospital. So that is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So with that, when you apply for a fresh study visa, so you apply in your country of origin, what I would recommend is that you include a copy of, for example, I think Cigna is quite a large provider, Cigna medical cover, and an undertaking letter to say that should my visa be issued, I will obtain medical insurance from a registered medical insurer recognized in terms of the Medical Schemes Act. That is sufficient, we found, for submission from abroad. But when it comes to South Africa, the expectation is that you already made the necessary provisions. And with that, you will need to get an insurance document confirming that, one, you are obviously covered and it's comprehensive cover, and two, that it is recognized by the Medical Schemes Act of South Africa. And yeah, I can see you have a question. Yes.
Does this apply no matter your age?
Correct. It applies regardless of age, whether you are a minor, starting grade R, or you are completing or pursuing your doctorate. It does apply.
On that, the reason I ask is one of the key things we see in South Africa a lot is, for example, let's say someone has come in on a study visa at grade 9, right? They finish their studies at high school. They now want to study in South Africa and transition to university in South Africa. They've also now transitioned from a minor to a major. What exactly is the process for that kind of person? Coming from that minor, coming from already having a study visa active for a specific school, but now doing a transition to that of university.
So you have one of two options. So the first thing is you can return to your home country and apply for a fresh visa, but I would not recommend doing that. What I would recommend is that you attend to the necessary planning, which I do know some South African institutions do make themselves subject to taking a bit long with confirming admission, especially universities. But if you can plan ahead and get the requisite documents from them, that will be very good, because that will allow you to then apply for what is called a change of conditions applications in South Africa, wherein you change the learning institution, so the high school, you change that to the university. And with that, if you are or you are accompanying your parents, you can use them as a financial sponsor. So they will write a letter to say they will take care of all your emotional, medical, physical needs whilst in South Africa during your studies. Or you can submit your own independent application. But with that, being your own independent applicant for a study visa, I've seen a significant amount of risk. Therefore, I would always recommend you get a sponsor for the visa. And when I mean sponsor, preferably somebody based in South Africa. It needs to be somebody with a long-term work permit for South Africa, or work visa, or permanent residence permit, or even a South African citizen. Because the problem is, Home Affairs do often question whether a student can afford to sustain themselves in the country, which is valid. The cost of living is rising. But yeah, that is my recommendation.
On that, right? So completely understand with regards to obtaining a sponsor, etc. But I think another key question which comes up for a lot of individuals is that of they now reach the age of majority. They are studying at a university, for example, but now work is at the back of their mind. They want to start living a little bit. They want to have some sort of income. Are you actually allowed to work on a study visa or no?
So Home Affairs did issue a directive in that regard, and you are allowed to work for up to 20 hours a week. But I must preface this, it must be part-time. You cannot take up full-time employment and the studies really become an aside to you. Your main activity in South Africa must remain to study, get an education, and let's say you finish that education, you can then pursue an application for a work visa. But to answer your question, yes, you can for 20 hours per week, but you cannot make that your main responsibility in South Africa.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. If you're in contravention of that, just for if there is any viewers out there, unfortunately, who are in this situation, does it mean there will be any consequences, or is it one of those where basically it's just something which is recommended but is allowed, or is it a case of black and white?
You asked this at a very contentious time, if I can put it like that, where Home Affairs has clearly made it its mission to ensure that if a permit is issued or a visa is issued to an applicant for a set purpose, they must adhere to that set purpose.
Yeah.
And if you were, for example, to have worked in South Africa for full time on your study visa and kind of abandon the studies, it's not just you who are at risk. So the risk you face is one, being declared an undesirable person for acting in contravention of your visa. Two, you can face a potential fine from the Department of Home Affairs. And three, criminal prosecution may be applicable.
So quite
But
severe consequence.
not just that, it's also for the institution, because one of the undertakings for that learning institution is that they inform the Director General at the Department of Home Affairs within 30 days of the applicant no longer attending the school. So the time is not just for expatriates to focus on whether they are compliant with their visa, but also to learning institutions and to employers. If, let's say, Home Affairs does perform an audit, they may even find the employer for employing the expatriate on the incorrect visa.
I think that makes sense. I think we've touched on the one side of the stick. Let's go to the complete opposite end, right? So those are majors. From what age are you actually supposed to get a study visa? Is it from when you go to primary school? Is it from basically the moment your dad is currently at work, so he's putting you in creche? When exactly does it apply on that side?
So it really does determine whether you are enrolled in a recognized learning institution. So that's somebody registered with the Department of Higher or Lower Education in this instance. And it does really it doesn't really have a set age, but normally from grade double R and upwards is when you should really be applying for it. When it is a creche, it is a bit different, if I can put it like that. Most creches aren't really recognized, but if they are, I would always recommend to err on the side of caution and apply for a study visa.
Yeah. Then on any visa type to South Africa, we always have to touch on this question, is the route to permanent residence.
Yeah.
With the study visa itself, again, for an individual who's here on their own personal capacity, they have no family who has, for example, a work visa option or something where they can transition through that route. They've studied in South Africa, they're now attending university in South Africa, but now they're seeking permanent residence. Does it mean they've been here, let's say, for example, for quite a number of years, they're allowed to transition from a study visa to permanent residency, or does it limit them in that regard?
So it limits them exceptionally. Like you mentioned, a study visa does not allow you to apply for permanent residency directly. And with that, if you are in that situation, a major, and you don't have anybody else sponsoring you, you can look, if you are a very affluent student, if you have a liquid net worth of about 12 million ZAR, South African Rand, you can apply for a financially independent permanent residence permit and apply through that route. Or if you are the partner or spouse of a South African citizen or permanent resident, you can apply on the premise of being in a faithful relationship for a period exceeding 2 years. But when it comes to actually applying it in your own right, and you are not in the fortunate position of having 12 million South African Rand in the bank account, or you are not in a relationship with a South African, you can then look at applying for a work visa. So you will need to secure an offer of employment from a South African-based employer and apply for either a general work visa or a critical skills work visa. And from there on, you will be allowed to apply for permanent residency when you do qualify. So important to note, as a critical skills work visa holder, you need 5 years of post-qualification experience to qualify and be registered with the accredited SACWA professional body. And your qualifications, if you studied in South Africa, thankfully do not need to be submitted to SACWA due to the long processing time. So for you, it's a bit easier in that regard, but you will have to wait 5 years of hard graft at your current employer. And When it comes to the general work visa, of course, you will need to be on that general work visa for a period exceeding 5 years at a time. So that means you apply initially for the general work visa, and then thereafter you can apply for a renewal of the visa. Once that is issued, you can eventually apply for permanent residence. So it is it's a long way, but there is permanent residence at the end of the tunnel.
I think in essence, basically, the study visa is meant for one thing and one thing only, is to obviously complete your studies. And then based on that, depending on your current circumstances, work visa options will become available. Hired person visa options become available just depending on the person's circumstances. So
Absolutely.
I think that's great. I think we wrap it up for today there. Hopefully that's provided some much needed guidance for a lot of students who are out there and are stressing about the next year and the next part in the journey. So thank you once again for all your insights. It's always much appreciated. And thank you to everyone who has watched today.
Thank you.